Hello, my name is Susan DeBold. I'm a Financial Reporting Senior Director at Cox Enterprises. Cox Communications is honored to partner with Nicholas House as a silver sponsor of the 2020 Dream Builders virtual event and the Let's Talk About It forums about homelessness. We are proud to work collaboratively to help homeless families achieve self-sufficiency. Cox Communications is committed to working together to solve our community's most pressing problems. We are honored to assist vulnerable families served by Nicholas House by donating our time and treasure to this significant cause. We encourage other community leaders to join us in strengthening families, improving lives, and making a difference. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Bakari Sellers, and I'm the author of a new book, My Vanishing Country, and I am a CNN political commentator. Oftentimes, you see me sitting in a very similar chair to right here on Anderson or Down or whatever show you may be watching. And I want to welcome you to the second discussion of Let's Talk About It, Unemployment and Homelessness. Pre and during COVID-19, there have been disproportionate rates of joblessness among workers in Georgia. Today, we are talking about the racial and gender disparities as they relate to unemployment insurance claimers, the workforce, industries impacted, discrimination trends, complaints and concerns, and resources available for workers. I am excited today because I have people on this panel who are smarter than I. I can't say that all the time about being on TV, but I do here with me today. I have Daryl Graham, who's the District Director for the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission Atlanta District Office. I have Mark Butler, who's the State Commissioner for the Georgia Department of Labor. I have Dennis Bowman, the Executive Director of the Nicholas House, and Calvin Camp, who is the Employment Navigator of Nicholas House. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. And even more importantly, I am from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And my mom and dad always say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And so before I begin, let me just say thank you for everything that you have done, everything you are doing, and even more importantly, everything that you will do. I'm gonna start with Commissioner Butler. What are the current unemployment statistics that exist for workers in Georgia? If you can give them to us by race, gender, and highlight for us the industries impacted most by COVID-19.
Well, when you take a look at, the unemployment rate, overall, we're at 9.6% for the state of Georgia. And, and also understand that, a lot of this is due to temporary shutdowns. And so we're probably not really going to know the full effect of what's been going on with the pandemic until a few more months. For example, we currently do not have June's numbers yet. They have not been finalized. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because when we went from April to May, we actually saw one of the largest drops in the unemployment rate in history, which the month before that was the largest rise in the unemployment rate. And considering that the 9.6%, if you take a look at the stats that we're seeing on individuals right now, and understand that some of our data, you're going to put a little bit of an asterisk beside it, because when somebody applies for unemployment, it's some of the information like race is optional. They don't have to fill it out. So if they don't fill it out, it's not going to show up in the data. It is an optional code. But just take, basically what we're looking at, if you take a look at the unemployment rate, which may give a little bit better idea, right now, white is at 8%, African-American 11.5%, Hispanic is showing right at 13%. And then it kind of drops off from there into some other subcategories and things like that. And then we take a look at male versus female, the male unemployment rate based on the latest data, which is going to be May, is male 6.7, female 12.6. And so that's kind of a breakdown of just kind of an oversimplistic part of it. I can tell you this: when we took a look at the number of claims that were filed, the validated claims over the month, most of the categories were staying about the same percentage-wise in the first few months. And you're talking about March and April. As it went on a little bit longer, we did see those kind of shift a little bit more. And if we take a look at just African American versus Caucasian, those numbers kind of shook out to where it was basically, anywhere from say 40% to 50%, or 31% to 64%. Going Caucasian, African American. So it was kind of, and that's kind of, I don't know if that's an anomaly because both those numbers were actually closer to percentage-wise of the claims in the very beginning. Because in the very beginning, when you had a total shutdown, it pretty much hit across the board. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at age groups, all the age groups are basically, except for the very top end, the very low end. Take a look at the middle, which is most of your workers anyway. Those are almost within a couple of percentage points of each other, which is in the margin of error.
Thank you for that. And thank you for that deep dive. Mr. Graham, my next question is for you, because pre-COVID, I'm sure there were a number of trends that your office saw regarding discrimination cases and concerns regarding diversity and inclusion from employed, underemployed, or unemployed workers. Can you talk to me about the trends and whether or not you've seen those trends change?
I think in the broad macro sense, the trends in Atlanta pretty much remained static over the past decade. But in the sense of diversity and inclusion, what we always like to say is like all economic actors in America's economic life deserve a fair chance, whether that's knocking on the door to get into a job, whether that's being on the job and being afforded opportunities for advancement and training, and also most importantly, being able to earn the equal pay. So the trends throughout Georgia, pretty much you got to look at Atlanta and Savannah, the two major areas. But by and large, what we've seen, again, the trends in a sense of having one elevated over the other for primacy, it's almost pretty much been static. Because again, we're here in Georgia, as a lot of people like to know, we're in the South. So the things that we always seen that have remained static for over the past decade have been racial cases. And that race could have manifested itself in the form of harassment and also issues that relate to pay primarily. But by and large, what we see at the EEOC is pretty much static trend. Pre-COVID has not really changed since post-COVID. In a sense, we're still dealing with that. But as far as identifying a particular trend, no. Now, more germane to our discussion when you talk about diversity and inclusion, and that's something that's really we anticipate seeing anecdotally since the Supreme Court's recent decision in Bostock that covers LGBT members. We may see an upward trend in those number of cases under Title VII in a sense of those individuals now being afforded explicit protections from a judicial vantage point, rather than just relying on the EEOC in its interpretation, because of sex means. So we're seeing that, we anticipate rather seeing that at some point later. It's a little preliminary right now because the decision just came out, but there's some uniformity now across the nation, particularly across the state of Georgia as well. So we anticipate from a diversity and inclusion vantage point, seeing those numbers maybe marginally tick up, and maybe a year out, we'll look back, we'll be able to pinpoint exactly what we saw from a diversity and inclusion vantage point.
Thank you for that. That makes perfect sense. Mr. Bowman, as families continue to be impacted by COVID-19, how is Nicholas House helping families to secure employment, avoid homelessness, and assisting families when they do become homeless due to lack of work by COVID? And I know you're dealing with these things every single day because this virus is still continuing to ravage our country. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Can you just talk to that briefly?
Absolutely. Nicholas House helps homeless families achieve self-sufficiency long-term. And, homelessness is a complex issue with many different reasons, even before COVID-19 came on the scene. But in the simplest form, you're homeless because you can't maintain your housing because you can't afford your rent. And some people can see that as a housing cost issue, that rents are so expensive, so it's a housing cost issue, or it's also a personal income issue, that you're not able to get higher paying jobs. And both of those are true. Certainly housing affordability is a huge issue across all of America, particularly in Atlanta as well. And we're going to have to work on that over a number of periods of years, building our way out of this through development. We're advocating for that. But on the personal income area, which is where Nicholas House works most directly, we know that there are systemic barriers to economic advancement, particularly for people of color. And 81% of the homeless population in the Metro Atlanta area are African American. 98% of the homeless families we serve are African American. And the economics impact of that comes about through many factors, whether that's access through quality education, skill development, environmental issues, the access to transportation in case of families having childcare issues, all are barriers. So at Nicholas House, we work with each parent to determine what their individual barriers are and how we can address that. Do they have prior evictions on their record? Do they have credit history problems? We also try to get them very quickly into some type of a job to stimulate cash flow. But more than likely, that lower end paying job is not going to sustain that family long term. And that's where we really invested in employment navigation. An employment navigator who works one-on-one with each parent to determine what are their skill sets, what are their dreams for the future and interests, and how can we get them on a employment pathway with meaningful growth potential and income growth potential. So
you still in my next questions there. I'm trying. I got to.
That's what we do. And I'll also tell you that children are part of the equation too. 70% of the people we serve are children, and we ask the kids, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And you know, you can be anything you want to be in life, no matter where you start. But you, even if you have to work a little bit harder at it, and education is a key component of that. So after school programming, summer camp really tries to help break that generational cycle of poverty, hopefully.
My next question is to you, Mr. Camp. Mr. Bowman tried to answer my next question already. I love it. I love it. But as an employment navigator with Nicholas House, can you take us behind the scenes of the adults and families that you encounter that are unemployed, underemployed, and seek assistance, and give us some of the details? What are some of the top causes you see that led to their unemployment, and how are you helping them to overcome barriers to employment?
Well, as Mr. Bowman stated, one of the things that happens initially, the clients are referred to me by the case managers who actually sat down with those individuals first. Once they're referred to me, I do an employability assessment with each individual and work with them through job coaching, retention skills, help them to create a resume if they do not have one, because you understand that probably 85% of the employers in and around metropolitan Atlanta are going to require that the application be submitted electronically. And so I work with them through those various issues to make sure that if there are any barriers, once they reach me to employment, that we work through resolving those issues and resolving those barriers to employment. One of the great things that we had to happen during the course of this time, even through COVID, I was able to find there was a family who, mother of four, who actually needed to make a transition in her employment as a result of COVID. And once I found out that Amazon was in the process as a result of COVID, increasing their workforce, I was able to help her to complete the application process. And once she completed the application process, within 2 days, she was actually hired through Amazon as a Whole Foods shopper, making $15 an hour, which was able to help her to sustain and maintain her housing. One of the other things that I do is I don't only work with the head of household, I also work with any of the adult family members that are there as well, because we want to increase total household income if possible. As a result of reaching out and having conversations with the families, being able to connect those guys as well. Another client that we had, this young lady actually was a cosmetologist by trade. And as a result of COVID, she actually lost her employment. But after sitting down with her, assessing her skills, reaching out to her and trying to determine what her transferable skills was, she actually had taken a sewing class during her high school home ec. And what I was able to do, I found out that medical was in the process of hiring sewing machine operators, and she was able to make that transition, and she was hired with them and actually got a job as a seamstress. And so she's working with them, creating masks and at a rate of $11 an hour. So she was able to maintain her housing. So things happen, situations happen. So there are times when people may have to make a transition from one employer to another, and we want to make that as seamless as possible.
That's really dope. Commissioner Butler, this is probably one of the tougher questions I have, but it's something that I know you're thinking about on a daily basis. What are Georgia's plans to help the staggering number of unemployed workers get back to work and sustain their lifestyles in the interim? So, briefly, give me kind of, what we're doing to the long term of getting people back to work, but, the kind of 50,000 foot view short term, what are we doing to get them to sustain their lifestyles?
Well, first of all, we have a multitude of unemployment programs right now, probably the most we've ever had in any one given time and space, which also has created some structural issues too. Up until this past March, you only had one unemployment program, and people were familiar with that. And with the CARES Act, it opened it up to 3 additional programs, which has been good for a lot of people. It's helped a lot of people, but it's also created some confusion. And so that's been one of our biggest tasks, is to navigate not only that for our claimants, but also for ourselves. Because some of those programs we had never been exposed to before, never had to do before. And so we've had to do a lot of additional training and learning during the pandemic with our own staff, with some of the new programs that we were asked to develop and implement across the state. One of those was for the self-employed gig workers, the PUA program. It had never been done before, and we were asked to implement that in a very, very short time frame. And so we had those programs. We're out there this past week. We actually paid out the largest amount of unemployment in a 1-week period in the history of the state. As a matter of fact, it was more unemployment paid out last week than basically it was almost 3 times as much as we paid out in all of last year, and we did in 1 week. So we know we're getting the money out there to those that need it. The big challenge I think is going forward is seeing when things settle, when the dust settles. We know a lot of these layoffs are temporary in nature. We're already getting a lot of phone calls from employers trying to recall individuals to get them to come back into their jobs. I think we're really probably not going to know the true picture for months down the road. I think where we really have got to be concentrating and spending our time is on training and quickly identifying those particular jobs that won't be coming back, identifying those individuals that won't have those jobs, and if they don't have transferable skills to go to another employer, there's a lot of money that's been sitting out there for years and years that I think has been underutilized through the local workforce boards. You may have heard of them, say WorkSource Atlanta, and other areas. It's just typically called WorkSource, something depending on the area of the state. I think a lot of different organizations need to develop some closer relationships with the local workforce boards, because there's a lot of federal money out there for training that can help somebody transition. Matter of fact, we are currently in talks right now with the Technical College System of Georgia to develop some short-term training programs through a very little used provision in federal law. In fact, I don't think it's been used in Georgia in about 15 years because it couldn't be used because the unemployment rate was so low. But we're working with them right now to try to figure out a way to tap into some additional dollars to help people be able to not only get additional training that they don't have to pay for, that would be free, but also be able to sustain themselves with staying on unemployment while they're getting that training.
Gotcha. Well, it definitely sounds like you have a vision, and even more importantly than a vision, you got your hands full, to say the least. Mr. Graham, what policies and practices are being implemented to ensure that once workers are back to work or remain in the workforce, that discrimination rates decrease? I know you said that it had been kind of stagnant or static, but what are some of the things you're looking forward to doing so that those rates and those complaints actually decrease?
I think being aggressive in a sense of being the civil law enforcement agency as we are. As most of you know, the EEOC was created to address issues of employment discrimination in the workforce. So we have existing policies and procedures in place that will be able to tackle these issues once you have that segment of the populations that is re-entering the workforce. And those laws that we have on the books, primarily if we talk about in the context of COVID, will relate to the Americans with Disabilities Act. But we also, again, have Title VII, the major statute that we use to get at some of these issues that are impacting workers negatively. But the bottom line is that at the Atlanta District Office, which we have jurisdiction over the entire state of Georgia, is that we're going to be very vigilant, ensuring that the workforce remains a place where equality is something that's just not actually parroted by individuals, but it actually has teeth. And the way we go about doing that is we conduct the investigations once a person has actually filed a claim, charged with us. And there are various processes that we have in place internally to address those issues, as far as like the ADR, that's alternative dispute resolution. We have mediators to do that. We also have lawyers as a last resort if we choose to file lawsuits on behalf of a charging party against an employer. But more importantly, though, it's the federal government trying to work collaboratively with these employers out there to ensure there's a level playing field. I mean, we talk about equality and what equality means. But some of the things that I've actually tried to impart to the community of respondents out there, the employers, is that simply just let us know what you're doing to ensure that an employer is providing opportunities for individuals trying to come through the door, employers that have individuals that's working in there, that you provide a level playing field. And having that level playing field, there's social utility in doing that. Because in the end, that long moral arc of the universe also advances towards justice. And that justice can manifest itself in different ways, and economic justice is a part of that. So we're trying to ensure that. We have the existing tools in place to make sure, though, that employers and employees know that the EEOC in Atlanta is being very diligent in making sure that there's a level playing field and everyone can utilize their skills and talents in the workforce to take care of himself, herself, and their families.
I appreciate that. That dropping that. I would expect you to drop that king in there being in Atlanta. So I definitely appreciate it and all the work you do, Mr. Bowman. I'm intrigued by the Nicholas House. And what percentage of the families served by the Nicholas House are unemployed and require housing assistance? And then, like on average, how long before they become unemployed, receive housing, and get back on their feet? Just tell us a little bit about the statistics and what, like, the meat of what you do there.
Sure. Actually, Nicholas House every single night is housing and providing services to about 300 homeless children and parents every night. We have multiple programs for families at different stages of need, but more than 50% of our homeless families actually are already working, but they're still homeless because they're not making enough money to really pay their bills and pay their rent. So we have a rapid rehousing program where we are able to get families into a lease with their name. They pay 30% of their income toward their rent. We make up the difference and then work with them with our employment navigator and other processes to grow that income, and they can begin to take over full payment of their rent, and we're out of the picture. And for those families who do not have income right now, who are unemployed, we really have a 90-day kind of process where we can get people sheltered immediately in an emergency shelter, permanent housing, what have you, get a housing stability plan, get the family stabilized, and have that housing plan in place so that we can get them a job. And then once they get a job, be able to move them into their own apartment in some way. We can usually get that job within the 90 days. I think the barrier has been trying to match up the initial income of that initial job to an appropriately priced apartment unit and then grow for their income for sustainability long term. And because of COVID-19, most recently, we have truly more than tripled our homeless prevention efforts, being able to help people who quickly lost their job, fell behind in rents and utilities, pay up those arrears so there's not a barrier for them moving forward, be a bridge really to their unemployment as that comes in, because we make sure that people file appropriately as quickly as possible so that process can begin. We can be a bridge when those funds begin to come in, and then have a long-term reemployment plan for them.
Again, the work you all do over there is so needed, especially during this time. So again, thank you for that. Who am I going to now? Commissioner Butler. You mentioned something about communities earlier and what some of the work they could do, but how can communities help to strengthen Georgia's workforce and expand opportunities for minority workers?
Well, I mean, just like, we're talking about the great work that the Nicholas House does, which they do. It's one of those tremendous assets that we have here in Georgia. When you're talking about individuals, especially homeless individuals, it's not just one thing. I mean, just a job is not going to get you there. There are so many different factors that go into that. Just like we tell, like I've told many groups over the years, when you're talking about the economy, you're talking about jobs, everything is connected. And when you're talking about somebody that's, especially an individual that'd be struggling to get out of homelessness to get a job, it's not just getting a roof over their head, but if there's children involved, childcare is a big issue. There could be some other problems in there. I mean, it all comes down to being able to pull together all the partners to stabilize the family first of all, and get some of those structural issues handled with them first. And then once that gets, kind of nailed down, and then, tap into the resources that are out there. And there are a lot of resources to help somebody get a job. In a lot of cases, what we see is one of the big issues is a lack of training, and it could be anything from basic soft skills to just basic skills. And that's one of the reasons why we have been working very closely with the Technical College System of Georgia to develop some very short-term training programs. A lot of these individuals don't have time to go to school for 6, 8, 10 months, or maybe even 2 years. And there's plenty of jobs out there that pay very good wages right now that don't require that type of lengthy training. And so by working with our educational partners, we've been able to identify some ways to get people back to work in some better jobs and some short-term training, something they can sustain to be able to get them back in there. But I think the biggest disconnect a lot of times is getting all the different partners on the same page and working together. And I think we need to be leveraging our local work source boards a little bit more than what we are right now, especially coming out of this particular pandemic. That could be very helpful.
So let me just ask one quick question of you before we wrap up. One of the questions I got just from the audience, I know that we're running near on time, but will the additional $600 a month, is it going to be extended or is it going away? I know that a lot of people are having that question in their spirit as they're going forward. So you would know better than anybody. So
actually, I don't know anybody. I don't know any more about the answer to that question than anybody else, because that's up to Congress, and who knows what they're going to do. They typically don't. I mean, actually, they've done a little bit better job reaching out to us recently than they did before. Like before the CARES Act, we had no idea what they were going to pass until about 48 hours before it happened. If we had have known, we would have given them some really good input of some things to do differently in the CARES Act.
Well, there is made things. One more CARES Act coming, Mr. Commissioner. They say CARES Act.
I know, and trust me, I've been in several phone calls with congressional staff and Senate staff, giving our input from the state side, some tweaks and things they need to do. But I know that right now there's a lot of discussion about the $600. And if I was a betting man, I would say you'll probably see a different version. I don't think they're going to keep it at 600. I think there may be some type of reduction if it does stay in. And I don't know what that. And honestly, I haven't even heard a number bounced out there. But I do know there's a lot of negotiating going on.
The answer to the question is we got the call your congressman, and we'll figure out the answer to that one. Look, does anybody? We want to allow for very quick. When I say quick, like 15 to 20-second final wrap-up remarks. Mr. Bowman, you probably get 30 seconds, but everybody else, 15 to 20-second of your final comments. I'll start with you, Mr. Graham.
Well, I would just simply say that an informed public is a public that's more likely to abide by the laws that are enforced when it comes down to employment discrimination. So you can always peruse our website at eeoc.gov. You can also make a phone call at our 1-800 number, 1-800-669-4000. Or you can actually reach out directly to our office at Atlanta District Office at eeoc.com.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Mr. Camp, you got any final remarks over there, Mr. Camp, for all the work that you do?
Well, I'd just like to say that as we've been stating throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we're all in this together. And in order to move the economy forward, just want everyone to keep that in mind. We're all in it together. And we just need an opportunity to get our individuals in and stay with some great people with some great skill sets, and all they need is a chance.
Mr. Commissioner.
Well, just to remind everybody to please don't forget to visit our website. There's a lot of tools, a lot of information on there. Make sure you take a look at all that that's available to you right now. Also, don't forget not just our regular website, but employgeorgia.com is our job board. And currently we have over 100,000 open jobs listed right now. Please go in there. If you haven't done so, either create a resume or put your resume in there and take a look at what's available in your community.
That's great. And that's a good resource. Mr. Bowman, you get longer than everybody else.
I don't know if I'll need it, but I would say that from Nicholas House perspective, family homelessness has been a significant issue long before COVID, and COVID just makes it a little bit more challenging. Hopefully that's just a more temporary issue. There are solutions to family homelessness. Nicholas House is one of those programs that are making a difference and impact in that area. And if people want to learn more about us, please go to nicholashouse.org and learn more about us and get involved in some way if you can.
So I'm amazed by just the wealth of knowledge that all of you all have in your respective areas. I mean, I'm so intrigued by Mr. Graham and the work that you do every day. Mr. Camp, you're kind of the engine that keeps that thing going, that keeps that 90 days at 90 days, if not sooner. Commissioner Butler, your hands are full. Nobody, when you got elected, you never thought that you would be leading through COVID, to say the least. And so, thank you for everything that you're doing. And Mr. Bowman, Nicholas House, I'm just learning about it over the past couple of weeks, months, and the work that you all do. I hope, you know, being from South Carolina, we can implement. And maybe in politics, I have a phrase, it's called R&D. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's not research and development. It's called rob and duplicate. So, you know, I hope that we can take some of the things you all are doing well in Georgia and do them here across the country. I have to thank our presenting sponsor, Genuine Parts Company, along with our other sponsors, PNC Bank, Ivy and Rose Community Fund, Cox and Delta Community Credit Union. And they have some really cool people coming up. So don't forget about the next series that has, as we talk about children and homelessness, but it has one of my good friends and White House correspondent, April Ryan. And don't forget to tune in. Well, I got to tune in for this too. On July 30th, they got Ricky Smiley, Kelly Price, and others during the Nicholas House Dream Builder celebration. Nicholas House will celebrate the progress of homeless and vulnerable families pre and during COVID-19. Also learn about the ways that you can become involved and stay connected. Learn about all of these events at nicholashouse.org. You know, Mr. Bowman, anytime somebody gives you 30 minutes, you got to drop your website up there. You saw what Mr. Graham and Commissioner Butler did. Got to drop your website. / Dream Builders 2020. Don't sign off yet. We actually have a slideshow coming up. Stay tuned for ways that you can make a difference. And at the end of the day, guys, everybody, we got 62 people on here. If everybody contributes just a little bit to the Nicholas House, we can help make a difference and feel good about yourself. So please contribute a little bit. And with that, I will sign off and allow the information that's about to roll across your screen to roll. Thank you, everybody, for doing it.
Thank you.